7:37, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Good morning to your friends. Thursday, September 12th. Matthew Hurtt joining us in studio. Matthew, how are you?
Doing great. I'm in town to spend some time with family. My grandmother passed away yesterday, and I'm spending time with my dad and my sister, who are they did a great job the last few months, really taking care of her at the end of life, and we're here to celebrate her life, and I'm glad to be back with family this week. 96 years old. Her husband, Private First Class Albert F. Hurtt, served and died in the Korean War. And she raised my dad for 60 years, essentially, in Clarksville, Tennessee. Did a great job with great family members.
Yeah.
And that's where I come from. And it's really great. Obviously, it's a terrible tragedy, but she lived a great life, a full life.
Listen, she raised apparently a family full of great conservatives. So that's a great thing.
Well, she was an FDR Democrat. The entire side of the family over there, FDR Democrats, and my dad, long-time electrician or worked at an electrical utility and wasn't really politically engaged until I ran for local office in Rutherford County in 2006. And then he started asking questions, particularly in the Trump years in 2015. And so it's good to have those conversations with him when I come home. And he's pretty plugged in.
I got to ask. So, and then we're going to get to topics, but so if your dad wasn't really political, then, and your grandma was an FDR Democrat, you said, so where did the conservatism come in?
I think it's in the upbringing. I saw my dad work hard. I saw my mom work hard. We've got a family structure where I've got a great sister. And in those values and principles, they may not be political at the onset. I think also grew up in a Southern Baptist church. We had a neighbor friend whose great-grandmother would take me and my sister, to church every Sunday. And I think it's in those principles and in the belief that if you work hard to try to get ahead, there shouldn't be something in the way keeping you from doing that, keeping you from achieving your American dream. So it's really awesome to have been raised that way and then to go out and take those principles to a broader audience or to train people how to win elections.
Very good. All right. So I want to play this audio for you. This is Jake Tapper on CNN talking about Kamala Harris and her debate performance.
Vice President Harris began the debate by punting the first question on the economy.
Do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid, and I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America.
It went on from there. Despite the economy being the #1 issue facing the country, the sitting vice president generally reverted to talking points about a few of her policy proposals. Even Harris allies today are saying that she needs to talk more about what she will do for Americans if elected. Senator Bernie Sanders will be here in a second to talk about more about the need for her to fill in some of those blanks. On the border, another vulnerable issue for Harris, she also dodged.
Would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings.
It's funny. I will say this, and then I'm going to let Jake Tapper have his comment. She's also the only person on that stage who hasn't actually visited the border.
As the border czar, she has completely shirked her responsibility on the border. Again, this is a humanitarian and a national security crisis.
Exactly. Let's see what Jake Tapper has to say.
Okay, that wasn't the question. When asked how she would break through the Israel-Hamas war stalemate, Harris said this.
We need a ceasefire deal, and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that.
Okay, but again, how?
So it seems like at least Jake Tapper over there at CNN is asking the proper questions now. Yesterday, I had 15 or 16 audio bites proving that Kamala Harris was lying over and over again, and no fact checking, by the way. Do you think that the further we get from the debate, people will look back and as Kamala Harris, many people are saying she won the debate. I will say that I believe that Donald Trump won the debate on substance, and that's a good example of it. But that Harris was a little more, she was smoother and she was more on point.
What Donald Trump needed to do Tuesday night was to say, are you better off than you were 4 years ago on the economy, on immigration, on security, on the way that the United States is seen abroad? And he didn't make that connection as strongly as he could have, but sheesh, we needed Jake Tapper there asking those questions and fact-checking in real time. As so many of the callers yesterday and Tuesday ahead of time said, this is Donald Trump being ganged up on by not only his opponent, but two people who are not objective. So the moderators did not do a service to ABC because they didn't give the American people what they deserved as we go into this election. And so I really think that there will be almost no bounce for either candidate really after this debate. And the American people now have more research to do because they learned absolutely nothing from Kamala Harris except for most of what she said was untrue and could be fact-checked. And Donald Trump left a few things on the table in making a strong case for why he would be best to return to the White House. We had Senator Bill Hagerty on earlier, and he said that the moderators were incompetent. I actually don't think it was a matter of incompetence. I mean, I think it's a matter of their plan was to make Kamala Harris look as good as possible, and their plan was also to make Donald Trump look as bad as possible. It was clearly a coordinated effort. And so I do hope that the American people, the ones that are more independent or they're not as politically active as you and I, that they realize what was going on, because Trump's demeanor, and I said this the other day, Trump's demeanor as the debate went on, it got just angrier and more agitated. Well, the reason for that was because he was dealing with not only Harris, but also these two moderators. And so I think they had a direct impact on everything related to that debate. Yeah, as you go through the 90 minutes, the more Donald Trump realizes that not only does he have one debate opponent, but two others who attempt to be moderators or claim to be moderators, it would be frustrating for anyone to walk into essentially an ambush like that. And I think that Donald Trump knew that was going to happen, and I think that you kind of have to factor in for that. But in live TV in real time, to see it happen to you as somebody who has been the target or the victim of the deep state, as many say, this has to be incredibly frustrating for him. And I heard that yesterday, listening to so many callers call in throughout the day, and the hosts. It is incredibly frustrating because the American people deserve an honest conversation about the issues that are important, and they didn't get one on Tuesday night.
Do you think one of the things that they did was they brought up things that the American people simply don't care about? They brought up January 6th and all that nonsense. And so for me, not only was it the fact-checking of Trump and no fact-checking of Kamala Harris, but the questions were sort of put forward in a way that was aggressive towards Trump, and the questions themselves were aggressive towards Trump. And I think that the former president, I think he probably would have been better served by saying, listen, I'm not going to regurgitate January 6th. Because what has happened since January 6th to this country is an absolute travesty. And he would have, theoretically anyway, been able to focus on what the American people worry about day after day after day. Because I'm telling you, outside of, the hardcore Trump derangement syndrome people, nobody's thinking about January 6th. Especially with our economy right now. Matthew Hurtt is joining us in studio. So if there is a second debate and Trump is sort of intimating that he does not want a second debate, would you advise him to do a second debate?
Elections are either about the future and hope and opportunity or the past. And we saw in this first debate that Kamala Harris wanted to focus on the past and not about what would happen if she were elected. I think if there's a second debate, it would take a lot of effort on Donald Trump's part to talk about the future, to say, my opponent wants to distract you with things that have happened in the past. But what is important to most Americans, what people care about, are can they make the mortgage? Can they save for retirement? Can they put their kid into a school that provides a quality education that doesn't indoctrinate them? Can we ensure that our streets are safe not only from homegrown criminals, but also people who are coming in from other parts of the world that we don't know whether they're safe or not? And so these are important questions. And I think given a second debate opportunity, Donald Trump could make that case.
So one of the things that I thought was interesting about as I'm watching the debate, you say that, we don't want to focus on the past, but I think we do need to focus on the past of Kamala Harris and the constant flip-flopping. They touched on it. They didn't focus on it. And I think that's part of my frustration is that truly is something that many Americans want to know about. I mean, there's got to be 16, 17 issues that she's completely flip-flopped on. It's insanity. And they didn't dive into it.
We talked about this last week, Dan. Her survey responses to the ACLU, her record. It is important when we go into the ballot box or into the voting booth to know what those politicians have done in the past. We can't always trust what they say. We have to know what they have actually done when it comes to legislation, when it comes to policy. And the American people don't know a lot about Kamala Harris. This was an introduction of Kamala Harris, and I think that she didn't do a lot of service to herself in the way that she looked in the split screen opposite Donald Trump.
Oh, all the faces that she was making?
All the faces
Lord.
and gestures, it really distracting and off-putting for many. And so it is up to Donald Trump. You're absolutely right. He should highlight her record because she's not going to tell the truth about her record and about what she believes. So it's up to Donald Trump and Republican surrogates and other candidates to make that case and then talk about how they are different.
So you think she was wearing Bluetooth? He hates me for asking this question. But you know what? I don't know if she was or not. I will say that she stopped making the faces about halfway through. And so I'm just wondering if somebody said, stop with the faces. You know what I mean?
There was a comment yesterday as I was listening to this station, and I can tell you, as someone who does live TV, you've got an earpiece in your ear. By the way, you almost always have an earpiece in your ear when you're doing a live television interview, not a debate necessarily.
Right.
But it is very difficult to listen to something coming into your ear and also listen to whoever's speaking and formulate a thought and be ready to make that point when the host stops talking. So I don't know, but I don't think so.
All right, so because people don't hate me enough right now, I'm going to talk about Taylor Swift. How big of a deal do you think that is? There was a story earlier today where apparently 338,000 people have called to the place to find out how to register in their state and so forth. And, you know, I'd be willing to bet a lot of those folks are going to do what Taylor Swift says that she did and vote for Kamala Harris.
You know, they may register to vote. I think the Donald Trump campaign can shake it off for the most part. I think that once they've registered to vote...
Hey, John, is that 5-6 times now that joke has been made on WTN in the last 40 days?
They're going to leave a blank space on the ballot. And let me tell you, look...
Speaking of blank space, let's talk about Taylor Swift's head.
There are, you know, many people may register to vote. It's very easy to register to vote in most states.
Yeah.
But getting someone to first-time registration in the heat of a presidential cycle to actually go and cast a ballot is a lot of work, and it's something that I work on all the time at Leadership Institute, where I train conservatives to win. But getting someone up off the couch, again, to register to vote. In Virginia, you can register online. In many states, you can. But then actually to make time to go out, to realize there's so many days of early voting, or to be able to get out of the office to go vote on Election Day, it's very hard. And I think the number of people who register from this endorsement and actually turn out will be significantly lower.
I think it's going to make a difference. I do, because this is going to be a really tight race, and it's not going to take a whole lot to put one candidate ahead of the other. And especially because I don't know if Taylor Swift, and you seem to know a lot about Taylor Swift, Matthew Hurtt. So does she claim Pennsylvania as like her hometown? Because that's a battleground state.
Well, look, I'm no Mac Maury when it comes to Taylor Swift, but what I can say is that this drives a narrative, right? So it came right after the debate, and we heard this on this station yesterday.
You're strategic.
The timing was strategic. Nothing about this was spontaneous. However, it is supposed to appear as though Kamala Harris is building momentum. Now, will this make it into the conversations of suburban women and young women when they talk with their friends and others? Yeah, it will. But again, going from registering to vote to actually taking action is quite a high hurdle. It's quite a high burden. And I don't think a lot of those people will do it. However, in states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia, Arizona, North Carolina, maybe even, certainly in Virginia, a couple of thousand votes here or there for one demographic is not insignificant.
The Swifties are ferocious, and that's something I know. The other thing, though, about the Swifties is that a lot of her fans are women. And I pointed out way earlier in the program that Kamala Harris's inflation really impacts women, especially like single moms, the sectors that women work in primarily. You know, a lot of women work in healthcare and also schooling and so forth. And so they've been hit especially hard with the inflation. So, you know, Taylor Swift said you need to do your research. and vote your conscience, or, vote who you want to vote for. But obviously she is telling people to go out and vote for Kamala Harris. My point is, if you're a female and you're listening to Taylor Swift and you do your research, you will find out that the candidate that she is effectively endorsing has caused a lot of the bad things in your life over the past 3.5 years.
In married households, women make 81% of the healthcare decisions. In married households, women make a significant amount of the domestic, when you go to the grocery store, when you go to the mall, when you buy clothes for school, for the kids. Women make a significant majority of those financial decisions. And when it comes to the pocketbook, the purse, the checkbook, the bank account, the Kamala Harris, Joe Biden administration has been bad for the average American, and many women see that every day.
Let me ask you a couple of things. Number one is the polling. So you got all these folks that are out there talking about how, Kamala Harris, she won the debate and her polling is up and so forth. Still others will say completely the opposite. And you said that you don't feel like either one of these candidates will get much of a bump from the debate this week. So what do you say about the polling where it does show that she has received a bit of a bump? I say it's all hooey, but what do you say?
We saw the anticipation of the Democrat convention, and there was excitement around Kamala Harris, and she was up in the polls. And then 2 weeks after the convention, that lead dissipated. I think we may see a nominal bump this week, but that will dissipate. And what I've said probably a dozen times or more on this program is that one poll doesn't tell us much, but multiple polls tell us a story. They drive a narrative. And so we're going to see, this is within a 2-point race everywhere, and particularly in these swing states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, other places. And for the American people who tune in, it's going to be seriously important to think about the issues and to follow, because the excitement is not going to continue. There's not another big event that's coming between now and Election Day unless there's another debate, and I'm not sure that we're going to see that. And so the polls will settle at about 1 or 2 points, and it will be up to the voters and up to activists in places like Pennsylvania and North Carolina and Georgia and Michigan and Arizona to go out and make the case and drive up vote and voter turnout among those demographics. We talked about the Taylor Swift thing in the last segment, and I think that'll drive up engagement among young women in particular, but does it drive action? And now it is up to activists on both sides to take that enthusiasm and turn it into casting a ballot. So a lot of conservatives, a lot of Republicans do agree that Donald Trump wasn't as good as he needed to be on the debate. But I don't think that that's going to dissuade anyone from going out and voting. I mean, I just don't think it will. I think the people who understand what Trump was going through that night understand what happened. And it's about the issues. And the interesting part of all this, and I'm sure you've talked about this before, but, you look at the fact that once the debate was over, Donald Trump still came out on top on the issues. CNN had a poll right after the debate, and it showed that Donald Trump was still the one that these people trusted on the economy and illegal immigration. So what do you make of that? There was some conversation yesterday on this station about the Frank Luntz dial, where Frank Luntz a pollster, and he has these dial programs where he'll have Republicans or independents or Democrats, and the independent dial, the enthusiasm, tracked alongside the Republicans when Donald Trump talked about the economy. You and I have talked about this countless times. It's the economy, stupid, as has been said before, and I think that is where voters are thinking and what they're feeling and what they're experiencing. And when they see that, they're not going to care about the promises of Kamala Harris. And many of them won't even care about the delivery style or the sometimes brusque nature of Donald Trump. I think it is on the policies. And when it comes to the policies, and the economy was better under Donald Trump. And out of the gate at the debate on Tuesday night, this is what was so annoying to me, is they make this argument that the pandemic ruined the economy and that's Donald Trump's fault. Well, none of that was Donald Trump's fault, and I think most Americans realize
all they had to do was follow the plan. That's all they had to do. No, don't get me started. All they had to do was follow the plan. Trump had a whole thing, and then they come out with these big old massive spending bills and all that kind of stuff. Harris, as you know, was a tie-breaking vote on both of those, and that caused the massive inflation. So I hope the American people understand that. Because that is something that the more you look into it, the more you do your own research, the more you read economists from both sides of the aisle, they will tell you that that is what caused all the massive inflation, and stuff is still too expensive. All right. You want to talk about Catgate? So,
as the owner of a British short hair cat, I'm happy to talk about.
I don't think it. You know, when you look at the things that are going on in these various countries, number one, it's not out of the ordinary to actually consume animals like cats and dogs. I mean, that is just part of it. But somebody pointed out on the super text line, well, Snopes says that this isn't true. Okay, but there's people in Springfield that are saying that it is true. Now, trolls, if they want to get some online recognition, they can say anything to get some followers. But what do you think of all this?
You know, PETA used to have a billboard where they had a range of animals from left to right. And on the right end, it was like dog, cat, horse, things you wouldn't traditionally eat in the United States. And I think this is another sort of sidebar set of issues where the broader question is, what is happening in these communities where there are thousands of people who have come into the country illegally through some sort of program that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have supported, that has allowed traffic crimes to increase, that has changed the dynamic of a community to such an extent. So a place like Springfield with 60,000 people.
60,000 people, and they import 20,000 migrants. Who makes that decision anyway? Like, is that up to the Biden administration? Is that who picks Springfield out of a map and says, this is the community that we're going to destroy?
And I think that when it comes to immigration, if there is some sort of process where people are coming here legally, of course they're going to move to places that are best suited for them. But, you know, imagine going anywhere at all, going into a school, going into the workplace, and all of a sudden 20% of your coworkers are not only different coworkers, but they're from a different background, a different culture. I think that this is
they can't even speak the language.
And there are safety and security concerns. You had some audio, I think 2 segments ago, about a woman whose mother-in-law was struck and killed. And so we've got some very basic things beyond cats and dogs and ducks and whatever is happening at the ponds in Springfield. There are safety and security concerns when it comes to who is getting a driver's license, who is being on the roads, who is in our communities that has not been properly vetted. Again, we have an immigration system that does that. And the Biden-Harris administration has completely ignored that process at the detriment of the security of the American people in communities like Springfield.
So during the debate, Donald Trump, I don't have the audio handy, but he basically, came out and he said very passionately, they're eating the dogs, which, number one, he got the story wrong. It's cats, but whatever. But I think he probably could have said it a little bit more artfully, where he could have said, we're hearing these horrible stories out of Springfield about these migrants eating animals and pets, but then do what, we all did as, talk show hosts and say, but it's not about that. And then he could have led into what else is going on, like we just talked about in the previous segment. Was it a mistake for him to bring it up the way that he did during the debate?
What you described is what hosts do is called block and bridge. There are a number of other terms for it, but it is acknowledging whatever has been asked or whatever the narrative is and saying, that's a distraction or it's part of a broader problem. And indeed, it is part of a broader problem. This is something that you and I, again, have talked about countless times on the program. Would I like for Donald Trump to be constantly on message and constantly ready to think about the questions from the mindset of a political professional? Sure, but he's not that. And he doesn't communicate that like that. And I think that there was an opportunity there for him to refocus and say, this is because of the Biden-Harris administration, and going forward in a new administration, in a Trump administration, we would seek to solve these problems. We would seal the border. We would ensure that illegal immigrants were not coming into this country, and that is not what has happened under the Biden-Harris administration. So he missed an opportunity there, and of course the mainstream media is just going to cover the cats story now,
and that's all they're going to do. And it really, what it's doing is it's giving them cover, because now they don't have to cover the other stuff. And so in a way, he was roundabout kind of way, giving them a way out. And so to me, it is really frustrating because they're not looking out for the American people in our best interests, just like the ABC debate moderators. I don't believe that they were looking out for our best interest because there are questions that the American people need answered about policy differences between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. And the moderators, that had to be one of the worst performances I've ever seen.
Absolutely unconscionable, but they follow the circus and they cover the circus. And so when Donald Trump sets up a circus tent and then he fills it with cats from Springfield, that's what they're going to cover, and it leaves an opportunity on the table for Donald Trump to talk about the policies. We have a record of Donald Trump in the White House, and he was strong on our veterans, strong on the border, strong on national security, strong on the economy. And he's got a record to talk about, and it's one that he can be proud of, and it's one that Republicans can be proud of as well. And so it is unfortunate that from time to time we have these distractions that then the media runs with, and that becomes the headline.
You know, and I truly believe, as we wrap this up, that the Washington media, I believe that they are the enemy of the people, exactly for the reason that we're discussing. Because if you really want to have a conversation about policy and issues and allow people to get to know these candidates, then they have a proper debate. It was clear heading into that debate that everyone from ABC did have an agenda. And I don't even know, I haven't seen this, maybe somebody else has. Has ABC commented on the breach of journalistic ethics that we saw on that debate on Tuesday? I have not seen ABC come out and defend their hosts or castigate their hosts.
I haven't seen anything from them, but you're absolutely right in the sense that the American people deserve a responsible conversation about policy. We can argue the broader question of, are debates important in execution of presidential duties? And I have always believed that this is not necessarily the direction to go. A strong debate performance isn't necessarily what we need from a president. We're not in a parliamentary system where the prime minister has to go and answer tough questions before his body. And I think that absent that, though, we deserve an adult level conversation about the issues that are important, and ABC did not give us that.
All right, 8:20, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk. How can people find you on Twitter?
I'm on Twitter at Matthew Hurtt, MatthewHurtt.